Now these are the Express paints by Vallejo. Now the pre-release PR for these was bananas and everyone was raving about them. But are these really as good as the hype suggests? How do they perform? What's the results you can actually get from them? And how do these results compare to something like the iPainter speed paints? Well, at least the version 1. Well, let's test it out, put it through a bunch of tests and see what happens. Now the thing is, we have all sorts of modelers and painters who watch this channel. So if you're not like a dedicated miniature modeler and you haven't seen these paints before, then they're quite interesting. Because the way they've formulated the paint is that it kind of flows across the surface of the model. So it stains the peaks, the highlighted areas, gives you mid-tone through the other flatter surfaces, and then it kind of pools and collates in a graduated way down into the recesses. So therefore it's designed to be one coat of paint and it'll give you the highlights, the mid-tones and the shadows of that colour. And different brands do this to different ways and different styles. So how does this one work? Now the first thing to note is that these have the kind of orange kind of security seal on each bottle. You have to kind of twist it and tear it open. Now the first thing I noticed with these is that the plastic of the bottle seems a lot lighter, a lot thinner. So you can see me squidging the bottle there really very easily. So in comparison, if I get a standard, once again, a Vallejo bottle, but for model colour, it's a lot tougher, it's a lot thicker. Now to open these, you need to turn it and break that seal. Now on this one, it opened fairly easily, but on another bottle, it was actually quite difficult to open. But it felt, with that lighter gauge plastic, that I was almost going to tear the bottle in half, trying to undo it and open it against that seal. Right, so first of all, we're going to test out how this paint behaves. So to do this, I'm going to get a piece of grease-proof paper that you'd normally get in the kitchen, and I'm going to write out the names of the colours that we're going to test. Now there's two main things I noticed when I first put a few drops of paint onto the paper. The first is that it's slightly thicker than I'm used to with the iPainter paints, for example. It almost feels like a Vallejo Model Air kind of consistency. The second thing is the brightness of these colours is crazy. They are so bright and vibrant straight out of the bottle. So brushing them out, they're already starting to flow into the crinkles in the paper. You can see that where it's lighter and darker as you would normally expect. The colour is quite a good consistency, especially where it's more darker. But interestingly, the yellow is a lot stronger colour than you normally get with a yellow paint. That's quite interesting. Now one of the things I found with the version 1 of the iPainter speed paint range was if you paint over it, then sometimes that colour underneath will leach through the surface paint. Now previously I had used the lid of my wet palette when I was using the iPainter version 1 speed paints. Now these have been dried completely for a good few weeks, and then the other day I had a bit of an accident with a bottle of white Vallejo model colour. Now this is quite a thick and densely pigmented paint, but even whilst it was still wet, I guess it kind of reactivated the iPainter speed paints, at least for enough for it to leach through and stain the white. So therefore one of the first real tests I want to do with these Vallejo paints is see if you get that same leaching effect. Can you paint a colour over the top of that Express colour without it leaching through? So I've left the Express colour to dry completely. Then I'm going to get some of the Vallejo model colour, that exact same paint that I spilt over the speed paints, and then brush that straight over the top of that dry Vallejo Express colour. So having let that dry, that Express colour has not reactivated and it has not leached through the acrylic paint over the top of it at all. So the first test of this stuff is that yes, you can let it dry and then paint over the top of it with an acrylic paint, no problem. So for something a bit different today, I'm going to use an Eldar Fire Dragon from the Games Workshop 40k range. So for today, I have primed it in a white primer. So the first colour we're going to use is the Plasma Red. Painting it onto the model, it feels very different compared to the speed paint from iPainter. This stuff feels more like normal acrylic paint. It doesn't feel thin or watery, it just feels like normal paint. Now colour wise, it is still very, very bright and vibrant. Now already the paint is starting to flow into the recesses, and give those kind of thinner highlights, brighter highlights on the peaks of the detail. Now the second express colour we're going to use is Imperial Yellow. Now painting over the white, this is a seriously bright yellow, but it's also covering really nicely as well. However, this yellow is almost acting like a normal paint. It looks like a Vallejo Model Air sort of paint, and the effect you're getting. I'm not getting a huge amount of that kind of contrasty effect. You're getting a little bit around some of this detail around here, but being fair to it, I guess it is quite a large, relatively flat surface. But on the flip side, it is covering it very well. But also, as you can see on the tip of the weapon there, it is kind of blending into that red comparatively easily, quite nicely. So yeah, you can get the contrasty kind of effects, but you can also wet blend them from one colour to another. So the third colour we're going to use today is Plague Green. So I'm going to use this on the hand grip of his weapon, but also on the grenade as well. Now this is behaving much more like you'd expect from a speed paint, for example, or a contrast paint. It is kind of pooling a lot more and is getting a lot thinner around some of the edges and some of the raised details. It's not covering quite as well as the red and the yellow did. And the fourth colour we're going to use today is Mystic Blue. So I'm going to use this on the lenses, but also I'm going to use it over the yellow, because I want to see how it works when you paint one express paint over another. So painting these kind of jewels, the decoration in the helmet, you're getting that kind of filter effect. So you're getting that yellow showing through the blue to make quite a vibrant green. So you paint an express paint over the top of another express paint, then you still get that translucency and you will get kind of that filter kind of effect or mix of the two colours. Okay, so that is painting over a white base. But what about a slap chop type technique? So I'm going to get another Fire Dragon. I have primed this in a black Mecha primer from Vallejo. And then using a dark grey, I'm going to dry brush over the top of that, then use a lighter grey, and then finishing with a light dry brush of pure white. So I'm going to use exactly the same colours, the same amount of paint, apply it the same way as I did the first time round. And as you might expect, the red on the slap chop model is a lot more muted. It's a lot darker compared to the bright red over the white primer. Now over the slap chop base, the yellow is a lot darker, as you might expect, but also the finish doesn't appear to be quite as good. It's not quite as smooth. I guess it's almost accentuating the differences, the jumps from those colours that we graduated in by doing the different coloured dry brushes. That transition is not quite as smooth as I might have liked. However, the green and the blue, you get a lot better definition over that slap chop base than we did over the pure white. Okay, so having let them dry, let's look at these two side by side. So as you can see, the one on the right is the one that was over the pure white base, and the one on the left is a slap chop. Now the one on the right, you can see how it's kind of gone into the recesses, and you've got that bit of definition there. Now I'd love to hear what you guys think down in the comments, but to my eye, the one on the right almost looks like a really, really old school, heavy metal, bright primary colour type paint scheme. The one on the right, it's not too bad. I'm still not happy with the yellow gradients coming through there. It looks a bit too messy by my eye, but yeah, you definitely get a lot more contrast by using the slap chop method with these paints. So from these initial tests, these paints seem to behave much more like a standard acrylic paint, but with more of that kind of contrasty type properties. But also looking at it, it is a very different effect compared to the iPainter speed paint range. So for example, this is the Vespid Stingwing model that he painted as part of that iPainter speed paint test. Now putting the two side by side, you get a very, very different result. The speed paints kind of behave like a water paint rather than an acrylic paint, whereas the Vallejo Xpress paint, it behaves much more like an acrylic paint. In fact, it behaves quite a lot like the Vallejo Model Air range. So is the Vallejo Xpress paint what you expected? Do you have some, and do your results match what I've found? Let me know down in the comments. The interesting thing is that the sort of results you can get from the Vallejo Xpress paint compared to a very different style from the Army Painter Speed Paint range, at least the version 1s. Which is your favourite? Now, if you'd like to take a closer look at any of the models or paints that I've been talking about today, then you'll find them all and a load more at flyingravenstudios.com. And to make life a little bit easier, I've also put some links down in the description. Now, the links are affiliate links, which means that if you do buy something via that link, it won't cost you anything extra. But what it does mean is the store may give a little bit of money back to the channel, which means I can buy more stuff to review. So it's a great way to help support the channel. Now, if you have liked this video, you've enjoyed it, you found it useful, please hit that like button and also share it to somebody else who you think might find it helpful. And I'll see you on the next project.